When people ask me what made the biggest difference in my life, they usually expect a technical answer. They think it was programming, or timing, or intelligence. But when I look back honestly, the habit that shaped everything else was learning. Specifically, learning deeply and continuously, even when there was no immediate payoff. Long before success, long before responsibility, I learned how to sit with ideas long enough for them to change the way I think. As a teenager, I wasn't special because I knew more than others. I was special because I was willing to stay with a problem longer. I could spend hours, sometimes entire nights, thinking about how a system worked, why it failed, and how it could be improved. That wasn't discipline in the traditional sense. It was fascination. When you're genuinely curious, effort doesn't feel like effort. It feels like exploration. That curiosity became the foundation for everything that followed. Early on, I realized that reading was a form of leverage. One book could compress decades of experience into a few hours. You could learn from people you'd never meet, in industries you'd never enter, and mistakes you'd never afford to make yourself. That idea stuck with me. I didn't read for entertainment. I read to understand how the world actually works. Economics, science, history, systems, incentives. Over time, that habit trained me to recognize patterns across completely different fields. What most people misunderstand about learning is that it's not about collecting information. It's about changing the way you see problems. You don't read to memorize facts. You read to build mental models. Once you have those models, you can move faster, decide better, and avoid repeating obvious mistakes. I've always believed that the quality of your thinking determines the quality of your outcomes, and thinking improves when it's challenged by new ideas. As my responsibilities grew, learning became even more important. When you're making decisions that affect thousands, then millions, you don't get the luxury of guessing. You have to understand second-order effects. You have to think about what happens next, and what happens after that. That kind of thinking doesn't come from instinct. It comes from preparation. Reading, listening, and being willing to admit what you don't know. One thing experience teaches you is how dangerous confidence can be when it's not paired with humility. Early success can trick you into believing you're always right. I learned, sometimes the hard way, that intelligence doesn't protect you from blind spots. In fact, it can make them worse. The more capable you are, the more important it becomes to seek out opposing views. I made it a habit to read things I disagreed with and listen to people who challenged my assumptions. Discomfort is often a signal that you're learning something useful. Another lesson learning taught me is patience. Real understanding doesn't arrive quickly. You can read a book once and feel informed, but it takes time for ideas to integrate into how you think. Many of the concepts that influenced my decisions didn't matter immediately. They sat in the background for years, quietly shaping my judgment until the right moment arrived. Learning compounds, but only if you give it time. I've also learned that thinking time is not wasted time. In a world obsessed with activity, sitting quietly with a problem can feel unproductive. But some of the most important decisions I've made came after long periods of reflection. Reading, writing, and revisiting the same question from different angles. Speed matters in execution, but clarity matters more in direction. Acting quickly in the wrong direction is far worse than waiting to act in the right one. Over the years, I developed a habit of taking notes, summarizing what I read, and writing my own explanations. Writing forces precision. If you can't explain something clearly, you don't understand it well enough. This practice revealed gaps in my thinking and prevented me from mistaking familiarity for mastery. It also made ideas easier to recall and apply later, often in contexts I never expected. As technology advanced, the importance of learning only increased. Change accelerated. Industries blurred. Old assumptions stopped working. In that environment, the ability to learn faster than others became a competitive advantage. Not because you knew more, but because you adapted sooner. I've always believed that learning is the ultimate hedge against uncertainty. Skills become obsolete. Knowledge evolves. But the ability to learn remains valuable in every future. One of the most surprising lessons I learned is that learning improves decision-making even when you're wrong. You can't eliminate uncertainty, but you can improve the quality of your bets. When you understand probabilities, incentives, and trade-offs, you make fewer catastrophic mistakes. You don't need perfect outcomes. You need decisions that are consistently better than average over time. Learning increases that edge. Later in life, as my focus expanded beyond technology into global health and development, learning became even more critical. These problems are complex, deeply interconnected, and emotionally charged. Simple solutions don't work. Progress requires understanding biology, economics, logistics, politics, and human behavior all at once. Without a strong learning habit, it would have been impossible to contribute meaningfully. Experience alone isn't enough when the problems keep changing. What I've come to appreciate most is that learning changes how you relate to failure. When you see mistakes as information rather than identity, you recover faster. You adjust instead of retreating. Learning creates resilience, not emotional toughness, but intellectual flexibility. You stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and start asking, "What does this teach me?" That shift is subtle, but it changes everything. Another lesson experience teaches you is that learning is never finished. There is no point where you arrive. The moment you believe you're done learning is the moment you begin falling behind. Curiosity keeps you young intellectually. It keeps you adaptable. It keeps you aware of how much you still don't know, which is a strength, not a weakness. If there's one misconception I wish people would let go of, it's the idea that learning is something you do early in life and then stop. The most valuable learning often happens later, when context, responsibility, and experience give ideas real weight. Knowledge without context is abstract. Knowledge with experience becomes judgment. Looking back, I don't measure success by outcomes alone. I measure it by how well I understood the problems I worked on and how thoughtfully I approached them. Learning didn't guarantee success, but it made success repeatable. It gave me tools instead of shortcuts, frameworks instead of formulas. If I had to offer one lesson from my experience, it would be this: invest in your ability to learn deeply and independently. Read widely. Think carefully. Write things down. Challenge your assumptions. Don't rush understanding. The world rewards people who can adapt their thinking as fast as reality changes. Learning won't make you rich overnight. It won't make you popular. And it won't always feel productive. But over time, it shapes how you see opportunities, how you avoid mistakes, and how you build things that last. That's been true throughout my life, and it's still true now.